Here in video number 25, we will continue to work with classes, but this time we will look at if you have one class with some attributes defined, and then we want to inherit these into another class, some of them or all of them. How can we do that? How can we inherit parameters from one class to another? Hey and welcome here. I'm Torkild Brunsnes, and this is Python Learning by Doing. I strongly believe that learning by doing, that's the way that works the best. It is for me, I can tell you. So try to follow this, these chapters here, and do what I'm showing on the screen. Follow it on your own computer, and when you have gone through all the different chapters, I promise you, you will be an excellent programmer. Well, let's grab a cup of coffee, and then let's just get going. And working with this exercise, we will need two files. I've made two files here, a mechanic.py and an appmechanic.py. The mechanic.py will be where we define our class for the mechanic, and in app_mechanic, that's where we will run our program. So these two files are the first we will create. Yeah, first of all, I'm sorry if you can hear some snoring sounds in the background. That's because I have an English bulldog on the couch here next to me, and she's sleeping and snoring. So that's the reason for the sound. It's not me falling asleep. But the first thing we will do is go to the mechanic.py, and that's where we will build our class. And we will make a class called mechanic. And this mechanic here, that class, can do different things. So we will make some definitions here. And the first thing he can do, he can change underscore tire. You can change the tire. And we always need the self. Oh, I did that already. So that's the first one. And then we can say print the mechanic changes a tire. Oh, we need that in the citation marks because it's a text string. So that's the first one. And now we can copy that here, and we can make different. Oh, should be an H. We can make different mechanics here that can do different things. So let's make another one here. Let's say we make 3. And the next one here has to go out there. And this here has to go out there. So the next mechanic here, he changes oil. Let's say more changes to make it more wordly correct. Changes oil. And the mechanic changes oil. And the last one here, let's say we can say does, no, we just call it first service. When you buy a new motorcycle, you need the first service. The mechanic does the first service. Okay, we switch over here to the app mechanic now. And here we will have to call in the class first. And that's from mechanic. And we import the mechanic class. And you remember the first mechanic, that's a file, mechanic.py, and the class inside that one was also called mechanic. So we import that as the first. And here in our app file, the app mechanic now, we will type in my mechanic equals mechanic. That's the class. So we set my mechanic equal to the class mechanic, and then we say print mechanic dot change tire. So we want the text from the attribute mechanic change tire over in the mechanic.py. And here I just noticed I had a semicolon. It needs to be changed here to the citation mark. But when you do that, and let's try to run this, and then it gives us a return. The mechanic changes a tire. And we can now also repeat this here for all the other tasks that he can do. You have 3 different tasks, this mechanic. 3 different things he can do. Changes tire, changes oil, and it was first service, as I remember it. So let's just check it. Changes oil and first service, yep. So these are the ones he can do, and let's just run it. And here you can see the mechanic changes a tire, the mechanic changes oil, the mechanic does the first service. So these are the things he can do. But now let's say we hire a senior mechanic, and that senior mechanic, he can do more than the basic mechanic that we have defined till now here in mechanic.py. He can also do stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3 tuning of the motorcycles. And he can do the major overhaul at 10,000 miles. So he is a senior mechanic. So let's make a new file over here for him. So he needs to inherit everything that the regular mechanic can do. He can also do that. But then he can do more things on top of that. And that we will now define here. So we'll make a new file, a new Python file. And this here, that will be a senior underscore mechanic. So we will just write a comment here. And we say the senior mechanic can do everything like the generic mechanic, plus some additional jobs. And that we have to define now. So here in this senior mechanic.py, the first thing we will do is that we will import the generic mechanic. And we will simply say from mechanic, that's the file, import mechanic. Now we have imported all the skills that the generic one had. And now we will define the new classes for the senior mechanic. So we just make a comment here. Then define the additional skills for the senior. So I hope you kind of start to see now that first we do this, we import the generic mechanic, and then after that we add the additional classes for the senior mechanic. And now let's go back to the senior mechanic in the app mechanic.py, our main app. So let's copy everything here that the mechanic, the standard mechanic, can do. And now we just make something for the senior mechanic. We can put an empty print line in here to separate them. And then we can say my mechanic equals senior mechanic. So we say my mechanic 2. We call him 2 to separate him, so it's not the same name. And then we can say my mechanic 2 changes tire. My mechanic 2 changes oil. My mechanic 2 does the first service. But then we can keep adding here. Because he had 3 more skills here. And then we can say, instead of first service here, we can go over and see what more was it he could do. He does the stage 1 tuning. So let's take that in. And he also did the stage 2 tuning. And we can take the last one. He does a major service. And now let's try to print it. There was an error. And then over in the other file, the actual app, where we call the classes from both the mechanic and the senior mechanic. They're here on the side. But this one here, that's the actual app. Now you can see I've added a little bit. I add a call up here, just like we had for the mechanic, where we say from mechanic, import mechanic. Now we add from senior mechanic, import senior mechanic. And then I have just made a header here saying print skills for a generic mechanic. And here we have the mechanics, the generic mechanics skill set. That's what we had before. But the new part now is that we also say print skills for senior mechanic. And then we say my senior underscore mechanic equals senior mechanic. So that's a new variable. And then we say print my senior mechanic dot changes tire. All the skills that the basic mechanic had, we can call in these attributes from the class. So be aware, the ones you see here, the first 3, mechanic changes tire, mechanic changes oil, mechanic first service, they are now pulled in from the mechanic.py. And then the remaining down here, my senior mechanic equals senior mechanic, print, and then we have the stage 1 tuning, the stage 2 tuning, and the major service. And these are pulled in from the senior mechanic class. So for the senior mechanic, it now calls in from both of these. So let's see how that looks when it runs. And let's go to the top, and then it will say skills for a generic mechanic, and it will list the tire, the oil change, and the first service. Then we go down to a senior mechanic, and as we imported, as you remember, and inherited the skills from the generic mechanic, he should have the same. So it also says here he changes tire, changes oil, does the first service, like the generic mechanic. But then the senior mechanic, he also does a stage 1 tuning, stage 2, and the major service at 10,000 miles. So here are the new additionals. So that's inheritance. You can inherit from one class to another class and combine it in your program file, where you then take the inherited classes and print out. That concludes this chapter of Python Learning by Doing. Make sure that you follow all the following chapters and go through the entire series. Also make sure to hit both the like and the subscribe buttons, because that would help me to keep creating programs like this. So thank you for doing that. And here after this there will be a link on the screen, and that will be to the next episode in this series of 26 videos. So take another cup of coffee and get ready for the next episode.